All right, I'm back. This is part 2 of my 3-year ownership wrap up of my Model 3 Performance. And this is shaky cam for a minute here. This is the video of the things that I did not like about my ownership experience overall, whether it's with Tesla themselves or the car or kind of anything in general that a potential Tesla owner may want to be aware of. So, right out of the gates, the biggest thing that I do not like about this car, and honestly the number one reason why I'm not getting another EV period right now, is that it is a very emotionless driving experience. I talked about in the first video how the car is completely silent. There's no engine noise, no transmission shifting, no anything like that. There's no drama, good or bad, to the experience. And for me personally, I don't like that. I did not realize that that would be as big of a deal to me as it actually has been. And I think that going from a 392 Scat Pack Hemi Charger, which is just balls to the wall, just a animal, loud engine, awesome transmission, going from that to this could not be a more stark contrast. Now, the whole completely silent aspect of it was really nice and unexpectedly pleasant at first, but as those months went on, it just sort of crept into my subconscious how unemotional the whole driving experience was. It doesn't matter that the car is fast. It doesn't matter that it's got, all-wheel drive and or any of that. It's literally like you're just in a robot, and this just a very emotionless, sterile experience. If you want a quiet, comfortable ride to get you from point A to point B with no gasoline, no noises, no vibrations or anything like that, by far this is your best choice. But if you want that drama, that emotion, the sound of the engine, the shifting of gears, if you want anything like that, an EV is not gonna do it for you. In fact, you're probably gonna have a bad time. And the longer that I drove this car, the more that bothered me. So that, right out of the gates, if that's a deal breaker for you, then just, you can go ahead and stop the video here, because you're not gonna enjoy owning a Tesla. I know I'm not alone. Several other people that either have driven Teslas or have owned them, they all have kind of had that main complaint of like, this is a very emotionless experience. But on the other hand, the people who do want a quiet, smooth, comfortable ride, that's the biggest selling point for them. So it can go either way. It could be considered a good thing for an EV owner or a potential EV owner. But for me, didn't like it, hated it. Another thing I don't like, based on some dyno testing, is that these cars lose a fairly good chunk of power once the battery starts to drain down. Once you're below 50%, you lose about 50 or 60 horsepower. and you lose even more once you get down to 20%, and you can feel that drop in power quite a bit. I get that the car is trying to conserve battery when it starts to get low, but I wish I had the choice, because if I'm just driving around town, it's not a big deal. I'm going to be at the house. I can charge up, no problem. I'll have plenty of juice left to get me home. But the car just doing that no matter what, I don't like that. I don't think that any of the other EV makers, at least I don't think Audi or Porsche do that with their EVs. I think you just get all the power until it hits zero, and that's the way it should be, in my opinion. So didn't like that. This next criticism is specific to the performance model. The performance model for $10,000, the only thing that I got compared to the normal long-range all-wheel drive model was a little more power and red brake calipers and that little red line under the badge. No, I'm sorry, that is not enough. For $10,000, that does not cut it. I would not buy the performance model again if I could go back in time and still buy a Tesla. I would 100% not get the performance model, because that does not justify a $10,000 price gap. What I feel like this car should have had as a performance model was better seats. Now, these seats are very comfortable, don't get me wrong. They're very comfortable seats, but if you look at other companies like, say, BMW, for example, you've got the normal seats, and then you've got the M performance seats, but then you've also got those really cool looking, but after sitting in them, somewhat uncomfortable carbon fiber seats. The performance model should have at least some better bolstered performance seats. Again, $10,000. The second thing that this car should have as a performance model is an adaptive suspension. I don't feel like I'm asking too much with that, because again, there are other cars from other companies that don't cost as much that do have at least some sort of adaptive suspension. Looking at the previous car I used to have, the Golf R, it had that awesome DCC system that really did make a good difference when it came to like stiffness and comfort, getting those settings. And I feel like the settings actually had a very wide range, and even at the stiffest settings it was still comfortable, but at the softest settings, man, that thing was smooth. And for $10,000, this thing should have had an adaptive suspension, even if it was just a comfort and sport setting. Even if it was just that, the basic bare minimum, that should have been on this car. In the future, I would like to see something like that. It should not be only on the Model S and the Model X. It doesn't need to be air ride. It just needs to be valved and controlled in a way that you can change. That. So if you want to put it in a sport mode, you got the track mode on here, but that doesn't change the suspension. It needs that for $10,000. Let's see. The next thing I don't like. Again, this is a big criticism. You are not going to get the range that Tesla says that these cars are good for on their website. If you get one of these and it's got, I don't know what they're up to now, 310, 320 miles, you're not going to get that. Not even under the most ideal circumstances. I don't care if you're right on the butt of an 18-wheeler on the interstate, you're not going to get that mileage. On average, and this is from user data on Tesla forums, you can expect to get highway mileage, and in my opinion, that's the range that counts when you're on the highway, when you're taking trips. Driving around town, I don't care. I'll just plug it at the end of the night. I'll beat the thing all day long in town, because I know I've got a plug at the end of the day, and I'm not gonna eat up all the range. But on the highway, you are going to see about 80% of the range that Tesla say that these cars can get. And I don't like that those are the numbers that a potential buyer sees, because they're wrong. You're not going to get those numbers. Companies like Ford and Audi and others, Porsche, the numbers on their website that they advertise those are more representative of real world range expectations for the owners. And I really wish that Tesla would be a little bit more honest with stuff like that. Oh man, the Halloween house, they're putting out a gigantic skeleton. My kids are gonna lose their minds. Oh, we got a spooky house. It's almost Halloween. We got spooky house in the neighborhood. They go hard on Halloween, and they've got one of those gigantic skeletons that they're unpacking. So anyway, sidetracked. Again, performance model specific complaint here. I want a carbon fiber dash. It's not much. Again, we're talking $10,000. Give me a strip of carbon fiber across the dash instead of this wood. The wood is nice, don't get me wrong, but again, you're looking at Audis, BMWs, Mercedes. You're gonna see carbon fiber in their M, even like the S, not necessarily the RS or the full-blown M cars. Even the mid-tier performance cars, you're gonna get carbon fiber, or at least an option to get carbon fiber. Tesla performance models should have carbon fiber. So another complaint there. Now I get that you can put on like the stick-on piece of carbon fiber, real carbon fiber to their credit, from like Alibaba or eBay or something like that, but I shouldn't have to be buying that as an aftermarket accessory. It should come with it for my $10,000 premium that I'm paying over the standard long range version. Let's see what's next. I think I might be done with my, I'm done with my, that's all the performance specific complaints that I had. Not really a big problem, but just one of those things where when it doesn't work, it's kind of annoying, is that the Bluetooth connectivity of the phone and the infotainment, it doesn't work as reliably as I feel like it should. Certainly not as reliably as it did in the Dodge. And when it doesn't work, it's really frustrating, because in my opinion, the media, the Spotify and Apple Music and the infotainment, it's not nearly as friendly to use in terms of just the UI and the navigation as a phone is on Bluetooth. So when you get in the car and you hit play on the Spotify or Apple Music on your phone, and it starts playing on your phone and not the infotainment, and sometimes you can sit there for about 5 or 10 seconds and it'll eventually connect and start playing through the car. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the car's just like, I'm not going to connect. And you can go into the Bluetooth devices and you can see the phone and manually tap to pair it or reconnect it, and sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you just don't get the Bluetooth connection until maybe the next time you get in the car. So it's one thing I didn't like about that. If you're the person who is leasing one of these and you enjoy it and you want to keep driving it, you can't just buy out your lease. You have to give the car back to Tesla unless it's a Model X or a Model S lease. Model 3, Model Y, you got to give it back to them no matter what. Doesn't matter how much you like it. You can extend your lease for another few months, I believe, but they're getting their car back whether you want to give it back or not. So it's a con if you really want to just keep the car and buy it out like every other company, as far as I'm aware, lets you do. Tesla don't. If you're using your phone as the key, which most people are gonna do, now I will say that is a really nice thing. I don't carry the little card key. I just don't carry it. I just carry my phone. Now, if my phone dies, I'm kind of screwed, but thankfully I never let that happen. But if you've got the phone in your back pocket and you just want to pop the trunk and you've maybe got your hands full, can't carry the phone, the car's not going to recognize your phone, and you're going to have to sit there and either like turn to like kind of like put your butt like up towards the trunk and hope that it recognizes that there's a proximity of the phone key there and you can kind of reach under and tap the thing to open up the trunk. But yeah, I wish that it was a little bit more sensitive to the phone's presence, without it having to be like, if it's, so here's the thing, if it's in your hand, it works, but if it's in your pocket of your pants, a lot of times it just won't work. Most of the time it won't work. And it's not a proximity thing either. It's like it can be in my hand further away than it in my pocket, and it'll still work and unlock the car if the phone's in my hand. So I don't know. I don't understand that part of technology. Anyways, no Android Auto and no Apple CarPlay. That sucks. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. The navigation on this car, I guess I'll just lump this, and this is on my list too, but it's further down. I'll just go ahead and mention it now. The navigation on this car is not that great in terms of the traffic data, and a lot of times the route that it wants you to go, it's almost like the car will try to choose like the most efficient for the battery versus what is the easier route to drive. There's one place that our band plays out at the lake, and the Tesla app on the map wants to take me through these back roads, is winding and twisting, and you might think, oh, that's fun. Well, no, this is at nighttime and you're in the middle of nowhere, so that's not where I want to be in a Tesla. I don't want to be in like rural backwoods stump jumping hillbilly territory in a Tesla. I want to be on the highway, and I have to intentionally ignore a lot of times, ignore the navigation on this car because I can't use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze. If I could use Waze, I could have better navigation. I could have all my favorites. I could have the traffic data that's actually accurate. I could have the police information. I could have all that stuff, but I don't get any of that, and it sucks. And like, kind of like, the kicker is you're paying $10 a month for it too. You're paying $10 a month to have a worse media experience with your music. You're paying $10 a month to have bad traffic information. It's never right. Like, it's literally never right. And I thought, well, maybe it uses more Teslas around town to gather that information. But regardless, even now in Birmingham, like, there's a lot of Teslas in Birmingham, but the traffic data still sucks. I intentionally will go certain ways to my destinations thinking, oh, well, there's a lot of traffic here, let me go this other way. And then when I drive by, or if I can see these other directions I would ordinarily go, sometimes I can see, oh, well, there's no traffic there. What's this? Why is the map wrong? So yeah, really not a fan of that. And paying $10 a month, it's optional, but paying $10 a month for that, come on, that sucks. Another thing, there's nowhere to put your cell phone in this car, in terms of mounting it. You have to have one of the, like, I've got a windshield. I'll show you. I've got this windshield mount. Is it right set up? Yeah. So I've got this windshield mount. It's nice and it's solid and it holds, but it bounces. And as you will have seen from the footage, it's bouncy, but it works. And they've got these other mounts that kind of like slide into the big long slot for the AC. It sucks. They don't really hold it. They kind of slip around. They've got some other kind that mount back behind the screen, but those are kind of in the way and really not that ergonomically viable. You do get the wireless charging pads down here under the screen, but Again, if you're using your phone as the Bluetooth music player and you're wanting to, play music or whatever, it's not the best place to have it. And on top of that, wireless charging in this car, at least on the iPhones, it doesn't work if you've got a case. It sucks, and it's slow. It might maintain a charge, but it just kind of sucks, and I hate that. But that was the card that I was dealt, and so I just use a good old-fashioned cable and this windshield mount. It does the job. It's not the best or the most elegant solution, but it's what we got. They tried to get too fancy. Let's see. When you're using autopilot, every now and then you will experience a phenomenon called phantom braking. What that is when the car thinks it needs to slow down for something that's not really there. It can startle you because there's obviously nothing on the road that the car needs to stop or slow down for, but the car will slow down. Now, not only will it startle you, cars behind you, if you're all of a sudden just slowing down or stopping for no reason, that can be a problem for them because they would not be expecting that either, because they would be looking at the road and see that there's no reason this car in front of me should slow down or stop, but here they are. It could be a problem. And if you're going over crests, that's when it does it the most. Sometimes if you're going from really bright areas to darkly shaded areas, like if you're going from bright overcast or brightly lit environments to like where there's like lots of trees, sometimes the shadows can mess with the car sensors. This one still uses the radar and the cameras, I believe. Or no, I think this one uses the radar. I don't think this was using the cameras. Again, they might have improved that with the different sensor technology. I don't know. All I know is that this car, if you're not paying attention, it will just slow down randomly, and it sucks, and you have to be ready to get on the gas again, or the gas. You have to be ready to accelerate again, just in case there's someone behind you that's not expecting you to slow down. The other thing about the phantom braking is if you're going down the street and a car pulls to turn in front of you, even if they're a long ways away, this car's still going to slow down, like unnaturally too much. It's really weird, and I wish that they could tune that to where it's not as sensitive to cars crossing the road and crossing your path as far in the distance. My wife's Volvo, it's got the self-driving lane keeping assist and intelligent cruise control and all that stuff. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about that. It'll care if they're right there where the car actually does need to slow down or stop. But further down the road, if the car's crossing your path, Volvo doesn't care. So I wish that was not a thing, but it is. If you're just driving around town with the cruise control on, when it comes to a stop, it doesn't stop like a person. It stops like a robot. And a lot of times it can kind of be alarming because it doesn't gradually come to a stop the way that a normal driver typically would. It goes until it has to stop, and then it's like, and it stops really fast. Again, if you've got someone close to you and they're not expecting you to slow down that aggressively, it might cause an accident. And so for that reason, I almost never let the car slow down for me. If I'm going over 50 and it's just in normal around town driving, I will always let the car slow itself down with the regenerative braking, instead of waiting for the autopilot to brake for me. I guess I could talk about the regenerative braking as a con. Normal cars, non-EVs, if you let off the gas, they coast until they come to a stop, and you have to apply brakes to slow down. On EVs, especially Teslas, when you let off the gas, the car starts to slow down. Like it's actually like you're lightly pressing the brakes. That's what it feels like. That's the people who've driven this car, they say that's been the biggest surprise in terms of just unexpected sensations of driving an EV. Was they weren't expecting the car to actually like start to brake when they let off the gas. They were waiting for it to coast. Now you can change it a little bit in the computer to not brake as much, but it's still going to do some regenerative braking. So that can be considered a con if you're not expecting it, or if you don't like that. You can't turn it off. I kind of enjoy it because it's just nice to just be able to use one foot, and I don't have to touch the brakes if I'm just if I'm not like actually having to stop aggressively. I can coast to a stop within maybe 5 or 10 feet of the car in front of me in traffic, or just driving around town, before I actually have to press the brakes. And the good thing about that is that you're not using the brake pads to slow you down until that last little bit of stopping. So theoretically, the brake pads on these things can last a very long time. Like I mentioned in my things I liked about the video, this car was fairly unique around town when I first got it. There were some other Teslas, but there weren't very many. Now they're everywhere. This has turned into the vanilla ice cream of vehicles in this town and other big metro areas. Like we were in Atlanta recently for a wedding. No lie, it felt like there was a Model 3 or a Model Y within eye shot, no matter where I was. At any given time, I could find a Tesla. Everywhere we went, they're just everywhere. So they've lost their uniqueness, and they don't feel special anymore. When I've got this car, I felt special because I didn't see any, like, people would wave. We would wave to one another in town. That's how it was. Now nobody waves. Tesla owners don't wave to each other anymore. So yeah, vanilla ice cream. That's about how it is. The infotainment has locked up on me a couple of times. Not very many times, but when it does, and it's like how you use the car, it can suck. And the only way that I know of to fix it is to pull over, park the car, and you press the 2 little steering wheel buttons in for like 5 or 6 seconds, and it basically reboots the car. And once the car reboots, everything's back to normal. It only happened to me twice in 3 years, so fairly rare occurrence. But when it did, you didn't know how fast you were going, you couldn't use autopilot, you couldn't do anything. Like, it was just completely unresponsive. It was like it locked up. So magic reboot. Let's try turning it off and on again. Let's see, there's only one body shop that's approved to work on Teslas in this whole area. Now, they're very good, and I actually did unfortunately have to use their services when my front bumper got clipped at the grocery store. But you have to have like a Tesla approved body shop do the work. Not really that big of a deal, but it sucks if you're gonna have to wait a long time because there's a bunch of other Teslas having to get fixed also. The other thing, Alabama doesn't have Tesla dealers. I'm having to drive 3 hours to Atlanta tomorrow to take this one back because Alabama does not have any Tesla dealerships. I had a recall for a coax cable for the video feed for the back camera. I never got it done because I was going to have to drive to Atlanta to get that done. So if you have anything that the mobile Tesla technician can't fix, you are just SOL if you're in Alabama or another state that does not allow Tesla dealerships. So that sucks. One thing that I didn't really realize was a bad thing about this company was until it was time for me to turn my lease in. It's almost impossible to get a hold of somebody. I don't have a dealership that I can just drive through town to get to and go to. I needed to reschedule my lease return and I have no idea how to get in touch with someone. I've emailed the guy who originally emailed me about my return, never heard back from him. I tried calling 2 of the dealers in Atlanta, and when you call their number, it just sends you to the main Tesla line. I tried a couple of different menu options to try to get to someone, and I just sat there on the hold for like 30 minutes a couple of times. And I don't know how to get in touch with someone. And that really sucks, because I know that if we have a problem with my wife's Volvo, I can pick up the phone and call the dealer. I can call the service department. I mean, I can pick up the phone and talk to someone. Tesla, good luck. That sucks. So as long as you don't have anything wrong with the car, you're good. But if you need to talk to the dealer or someone to actually help you, then might not be a good experience. Let's see next. Over-the-air updates. In theory, pretty cool. For the most part, they have been pretty cool. They add new features, but sometimes they take features away. They did a major user interface overhaul about a year ago. I was not a fan of it. I'm still not a fan of it. One of the biggest things that they took away was the ability to just drag through the progress bar on a song or a podcast or whatever. You can't do that. Hence why I don't listen to music or podcasts or anything like that on the infotainment system. I use my phone because my phone still has that little slider, little progress bar. It's just one random little example, but there are a lot of other things that they changed and they had to kind of backpedal on and go back and fix. But the infotainment, for the most part, is in a pretty good place right now. All those shortcuts at the bottom of the screen, those are super handy. Always having the AC controls at the bottom of the screen, that's nice. But they've had some misses with the updates. One of the changes that they made over the year updates was that if you're using the autopilot, the lane keep assist, you have to use your auto bright headlights, and a lot of times they don't turn off and go to the normal beams. I don't like that. If it's raining, they make you use the absolutely atrocious auto windshield wipers. The windshield wipers suck. The auto rain sensing windshield wipers, they suck. So forcing you to do that instead of just being able to pick just a constant speed, I don't like that. It used to not be that way. They changed that in an update, and you cannot undo that. Another thing, and this is more of a safety feature than anything, this car needs a heads-up display. You can get heads-up displays in cars significantly cheaper than this. There needs to be a heads-up display in the Teslas, mainly because there's not a speed right in front of your eyes. You have to look over, not here. And if there was at the very bare minimum, if there was just a speedometer, it would be fine. But not having that, come on, Tesla, $55,000, $40,000. We should get a heads-up display. It's not hard. Air conditioning vents. What in the world? It's cool for like 2 seconds when you realize that there's not traditional vents. It's just one long opening across the dash. And while it's neat aesthetically, and from a design language, that's really cool. But when it comes to actually adjusting it, you're sitting there fumbling around in a menu, and it sucks. It's a pain in the butt. I don't like it. They try to make the menus look real nice and all that, and show you the animations of the wind flow, but in actual practice, it'd be like 1,000 times better if you could just twist a vent direction around. This next one is kind of Alabama specific, or more rural area specific, is that even now, as Teslas and EVs have become more commonplace in metro areas and even suburb areas and stuff like that, when you're out in the rural areas, there's still a weird stigma with these cars and country folk where they don't like them. And I'm just like, it's just a car. Nobody's trashing beat up Dodge Ram with a straight pipe exhaust, or your diesel truck that's rolling coal down the road, nobody's trashing you. I mean, mentally, yeah, maybe you would probably have a couple of things, to think about, stuff like that. But I'm not going to be like openly trashing cars the way that people from rural areas seem to kind of get pleasure out of doing with EVs. I remember this one show we played. It was Childersburg, Alabama. It's a small town, really fun bar, but man, I get outside and they're like, "Who's this UFO out here?" Like that kind of stuff. It's kind of unnecessary, but I guess I don't know how long it'll be before that's not a thing, but at least here in Alabama, that's the thing. Buying the car out of state was kind of a pain in the butt. The paperwork from Tesla arrived late, meaning the temporary tag that I was given expired. Thankfully, I didn't get pulled over, but the other problem with that was that they FedEx the papers to the DMV, and there's no communication inside the DMV, at least here in Birmingham. And so it was an all-day pain in the butt to try and get a hold of someone who knew where the paperwork was, knew what to do. They had to find another person to go out to this special parking lot that I didn't know about, that I had to go park in so that they could inspect it, just to make sure that it was the same car that I was trying to register. So that whole part, the whole part of the buying experience, that really sucked. And again, trying to get in touch with anyone at Tesla, even like the person that they assigned to me as my new ownership experience liaison, or whatever she was, I couldn't get in touch with her. It was just like, the number she gave me sent me to the main Tesla number, and that got me nowhere. I didn't have her email. It was worthless. This next part has kind of bit me a couple of times. If you have any impromptu trips that you need to make out of town, it could be a pain, because you might not be at a state of charge that's high enough to get you where you need to go, especially if you're in a hurry. One of my previous jobs where something would happen, I'd be like, all right, okay, well, I need to go to this office, and it's down in South Alabama. Well, I don't have enough charge to get down there. I don't have enough charge to get to the supercharger middleman point get to the destination. So I'm sitting there like, what do I do? Do I go home for 2 hours while there's an emergency that I need to get in my car and just get down there and fix a problem? Like, I had to bum a ride with a coworker that took him away from his daily work tasks, but that was my only choice. Now, granted, that was an outlier situation, but it was not the only time that happened. And now that the supercharger network is built up a little bit better, that wouldn't be as big of a problem. But at that point, when that happened, it was a huge problem. And it was one of those, like, did I make the right choice type problems. Like, it was that bad. Because it was one of those things where, like, I have to do this, my job depends on it, and this car could potentially cost me my job, because the charging network in Alabama at the time was god awful. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind. If you live around a lot of chargers, then not a big deal. So very situational, but for me in that situation, it was bad. Speaking of supercharging, it's not as cost effective as it used to be. When I bought the car, it was 14 cents per kilowatt hour in Alabama and Georgia. I went back again in that TeslaFi app that I mentioned that collects all the information. I was going and looking at supercharging history back the first year I got the car. 14 cents per kilowatt hour. July of 23, that was the last time I supercharged. It was 42 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but when it comes down to how far you can drive per kilowatt hour and the mileage you get, it's a lot of money. And it's a lot of money to the point to where a car that gets around 35 or so miles per gallon, that's going to be cheaper to drive per mile than this if you're only supercharging. Now, that's a big if, because a lot of people don't always supercharge. A lot of people are going to have chargers at their house, at their office, at their destinations, and things like that. But strictly speaking, getting from point A to point B on the interstate, if you're doing a lot of road trips and stuff like that, supercharging has gotten to the point to where it's a little bit too expensive for my liking. So it's another thing to keep in mind. And again, it's situational, but looking back at the past information, I can see how it's probably just going to keep going up. It's probably not going to get any cheaper. Lastly, and again, it's not really a huge deal, especially for me because it doesn't apply to this car, but in the refresh, they're taking away the 2 stalks on the side of the steering wheel. It is burned into our brains to hit the turn signals, to windshield wipers, things like that. It's been burned into our brains, that muscle memory, and now they're putting it on the steering wheel, and I'm sure it probably won't take too long to adjust to. But how many accidental turn signal presses are you going to have when you've got those on the steering wheel? If your hands or palms accidentally hit them. What about accidental windshield wiper activation, stuff like that? Again, the cars aren't out yet with these new refreshes, so it might not be a problem, but it could potentially be. So yeah, that is that's my unfortunately longer than I would have liked list of the things that I don't like about the car. If you're watching this video and you're considering a Tesla or another EV, ask yourself how much of this information applies to my situation or theoretical situations. A lot of times we don't think about the times that the things that I don't like about the car would actually apply until I'm in that situation. Even if it's very rarely in those situations, the chance that it could happen, ask yourself, if this does happen, how annoyed or how upset will I be with this? How big of a deal will this be for me personally as a car owner? And ask yourself if it's worth it. Compare it to a similar situation or feature or whatever on a normal gasoline car and ask yourself, is it going to be a better scenario, EV versus conventional internal combustion? It's down to the buyer, to your situation, to your living arrangement. Do I live in an apartment where I don't have access to a 50 amp plug? I had to install one in my garage. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't hard, but I had an expert that knew what he was doing helping me, and going forward, it's something that I know now how to do. But if you live in an apartment and they just don't have that option, what are you going to do? You're going to supercharge all the time. Well, now all of a sudden, those higher supercharger prices become a much bigger problem or consideration than someone who lives at their house like I do with a 50 amp plug. Charging at home or charging in my office, charging is not a problem for me. I supercharge so rarely that the supercharger prices isn't that big of a deal. But if you were the potential buyer who would have to supercharge more frequently, all of a sudden that's going to be brought way up higher on your list of considerations. If you're someone who really connects with the vehicle, with that emotional experience of the engine, the exhaust, the gears, a lot of people, they're purists, like they want to shift their own gears. Other people, they don't mind the automatic as long as the performance is there. How big of a deal is that to you? Could that potentially be a deal breaker for you? Are you willing to sacrifice that part of the driving experience and the automotive sensory experience in favor of some of the other things that are unique to EVs, like the power and the torque that's like instantly on, the silence, the lack of vibrations, the lack of maintenance, the lack of oil changes, the not having to really use brake pads, like all those things, like those are things that you have to consider personally for yourself in your situation. All I can do is explain the things for me, my situations, my lifestyle that I did and did not like about this car. So hopefully I haven't rambled too much. I've tried to stay on script. I've got my notes here. I've tried to be as forthcoming and honest and transparent as I can about the experience, about the things I did and did not like. I think there are awesome things about these cars, EVs in general, Teslas in specific as well. And then I think there are some things that they can do better. So I hope I went through all of that stuff for you guys. I hope that it's given you at least a little bit of information that you can use if you're a potential buyer, or maybe not quite ready yet, but in the future would be considering something like this. Or if you're a Tesla owner now and just want another perspective. So yeah, thanks for sticking with me if you've made it this far. I know, again, this is not really something I do on this channel. I've been kind of quiet in terms of my videos because I've really just been playing shows and enjoying the stuff that I've got, and really not making any changes with the guitar gear. But yeah, tomorrow's the last day, assuming that I can actually drop off my car. I'm going to the dealership regardless because I got to go pick up my other car, which I'll do a video on that after I get it. I'm hoping that they don't be like, oh, well, your appointment's for next week, so you've got to come back next week. I'll be like, no, here's the keys. Bye. I'm done. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Until then, I will talk to you guys later. See y'all.